Welcome to the show today. Today, we're going to be talking about how to boost your innovators mindset. Today, we have Mr. George Couros, who is currently an innovative teaching, learning, and leadership consultant, speaker as well, also an author of The Innovator's Mindset and Innovate Inside the Box. Formerly, he was the division's principal of innovative teaching and learning in the Parkland School Division, located in Stony Plain, Alberta, Canada, and have over 20 years of experience as an educator. Let's welcome Mr. George to the show. How you doing?
Randy, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you, and I'm excited for your questions today. What you got?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of questions in education. So, you know, teachers are very unappreciated. What made you get into the educational field?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at education, I think in the last year or so, I hope so, anyways, that people realize how hard education is. I think a lot of people having their kids at home and realizing when they had to start teaching how complex it is, and then if you have like one kid, how hard it can be, and times that by 2025. But for me, when I first started, I actually really had always connected with with kids and had loved doing that. But I also was coaching sports, and in Canada, we actually you don't get paid to coach sports at the high school level. It's a volunteer thing.
Oh
So I
wow.
wanted to get into there, and I was really interested in teaching elementary, but I also coached high school basketball, high school football as well. And really, I just wanted to, make an impact. I had a lot of great teachers that made an impact on me. And interestingly enough, I actually reported or recorded a podcast on my own just a couple of days ago, and I talked about three teachers that had a huge impact on me when I was in school. And I'm 45 years old, going on 46, and I talked about my kindergarten teacher, my grade 3 teacher, and my phys ed, high school phys ed teacher, and every single one of them literally commented on my post. And they were talking like, this is 40 years ago that I had a kindergarten teacher. So it's just, I want to have that same impact those teachers had on me, on not just kids, but the adults I work with as well too.
Oh yeah, that's awesome because teachers are underappreciated. I always remember one teacher in particular, my fifth grade teacher, Miss Washington. She left such a great impression on my life, and recently. Pre COVID, I went into this restaurant and they have these little different themes, and it said, name the teacher that had the greatest impression on you, and clearly that was Miss Washington. And so when you order your food, they'll say the teacher's name, Miss Washington, and then it just put a smile on my face, remembering,
That's
the great
awesome.
impression that she put on me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when people think about school and why many teachers are maybe unappreciated, is they think about some of the bad experiences. And I know that I had some bad experiences as a student as well, but we don't really think about how many, like the phys ed teacher that I mentioned. He had said something to me when I was in grade 12, and that was my first year interact with him, and I still like learned from it. And basically, I was a football player, and I told him, because I was there for 4 years and he had just came, that, hey, look, I'm going to be the captain because I've been here 4 years and you're the new guy. And he's like, oh, you expect it. And he said, and then he worked me and worked me. He said, you actually earned the captain to be captain of the team, but don't ever expect to get something just because you put years in, right? You have to earn everything that you have. And to be honest with you, Brandon, when he said that to me, I was like, I really could care less what he said. I'm captain. So like I didn't care at the time because I got what I wanted. But when I look back at that and as the year progressed, it has always stuck with me. And it's something that, like when I work and the things I do, it's really, thinking about I have to earn, the opportunities I have. And that was instilled by me, my teacher. And I think we have to remember those moments that stuck with us, because we all have, bad experiences, just like we have bad experiences and, going on airlines, going in banks
True.
and stuff like that. But we don't focus on the really positive things. And it's like, social media, people go there to complain, but very rarely go there to praise.
That is so true.
Mhm.
So you created this new concept, this new book. So tell us, what is the innovator's mindset?
Yeah, so the innovator's mindset actually really is stemming from my work as division principal of innovative teaching and learning in Parkland School Division. And what was fascinating was this was a position that didn't exist. We created it, and you hear like stats like this, and I have no idea how true these are. Like, oh, like 50% of jobs in 10 years won't have existed today. And we're constantly talking about preparing kids, but we're preparing them for that by doing the exact same jobs that we're always doing in education. So we said, look, we need to think differently about how we do this. So we created this role, and I actually named it. I got to kind of write the description with my superintendent because we were doing some really interesting things when I was actually a school principal. And we just said, hey, let's go with like innovative. Let's talk about innovation. And we talked about it. And we also said, okay, what does that even mean? Like, what does that actually mean? And a lot of people, when they
Right, right,
think about the notion of innovation, they think about innovation equals technology, right? So you think
right.
about your iPod, your iPhone, right? Zoom, things like this as an innovation. But really, it's the thinking behind what created those things, which is actually the innovation. And so part of my job was to define that. And I looked a lot at like Carol Dweck's work. She talks about fixed and growth mindsets, and basically growth mindset, just, for a simple analogy. And I'm
Mm.
sure, obviously she would go much further and maybe even argue some of the stuff I'm saying is that, we teach kids that, hey, like you have the ability to be good at math, right? Like you have to
Right.
put that in your mentality that you are able to figure out this math that we're teaching you. And for me, I was like, hey, that's actually important, but I don't think it's enough. So when we kind of make that jump to the innovators mindset, it's that I'm not only going to learn this math, I'm going to actually be able to do something with this, that I'm actually going to be create something with this. And I think that's really important is
That's correct.
because you might be able to learn concepts and know them inside out. And that might, set you up for doing well on a test or maybe even later, winning on Jeopardy, but it actually doesn't get you to create new things. Right. And
Right.
I think that's a huge shift is a little bit that growth mindset. I think it's important, but I think sometimes it's been, especially at the education level, it's just a fancy way to say compliance. Like, hey, we know you hate math, but you can do
Right.
it. You can figure it out, if you just believe that. And it's like, but I don't see the value in this. So I think part of it on the side of the teacher, it's really important to be able to emulate that mindset and be able to show here are some ways that you can actually utilize this and create something as you move forward. And that to me, I look at the past year, and I was just talking to a friend about this. The notion of the innovator's mindset. I'm a speaker who travels around the world. That's literally my job. And within one day, I had to like figure out, okay, that's not happening right now. So I could have just sit and, whined about it, but I created a bunch of different opportunities for myself. And I think I try to emulate this because not everything goes your way, but how do you take this learning? How do you learn from other people and see what they're doing? How do you learn from what you read and what you connect with and actually do something with that knowledge? And you read probably a lot of articles that will say things like, hey, like I read 100 books this year. I'm like, and did what? Like, what did
Right.
you just read them? Did you just consume the information? Or like, I'd rather read five and actually do something really powerful with what I learned from that concept. And so that's what we're trying to develop in our students. But I think it's really important to emulate that as educators as well.
That's awesome. So you really hit a lot on the importance of the mindset of learning. So how important is it, the mindset in learning, if you will? Not just telling kids that they can do it, but how important is it that they actually believe that they can do it?
Well, yeah, and like I don't know if it's I don't know if it's like, hey, I believe I'll be able to create something. It's like that's the mentality that you have to have going into this stuff, right? Like you have to be able to look at these things and to be able to shift. And like if you think about your experience, we can always talk about great teachers we had, but what are the things that you do today that you learned in school, and actually created something with, and even having conversations about we have to really kind of rethink school in the sense that like what are the basic skills, right? Like what are the basic skills? Probably when I went to school, like cursive handwriting was really crucial, right? Then COVID happens
Yes.
and we're all connecting to computers and nobody's like, hey, does anyone know how to do cursive? Like nobody cares
Correct.
at that, right? So the abilities, like I had barely used Zoom, I had barely used some of the things that I knew. So I had to take some of the ideas that I had been exposed to and actually create that. And I think it's kind of getting students to actually see that they can have a tremendous impact on our world right now. And one of the things that we talk about is, and this is the other book that you mentioned, Innovate Inside the Box, is that there are certain government constraints. There are certain expectations that we have to do, like kids have to do well on these standardized tests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if
Right.
I actually know my content so well that I could create something with it, the test will be fine, but I'm actually more prepared for life. And the analogy I give is the growth mindset. I believe I have the ability to learn to play the piano, but the innovator's mindset, I don't think I can just play. I'm going to compose, I'm going to create music. And so I
Awesome.
think it's not just a skill that took for kids to do well in school, which, yeah, of course we want to check a box. But when you walked out of school, did you feel that you were prepared for life? Like, I'm not, I know it's going to sound weird. I'm not looking to prepare kids to go work for other people. I'm looking to help kids actually create jobs, to create opportunity for themselves.
Yes.
And understand there's different opportunities that didn't exist when I was a kid. Like YouTuber is a job that many teachers, to be honest, many adults laugh at right now. But a lot of kids are like walking out of school, creating stuff that they want, making a good living, doing something that they feel is fulfilling. And that's not something that, I think that's awesome. And I just think it's trying to get kids to like walk out of school with purpose and understanding that they can actually create their own path.
That's awesome because that's a great segue into my question about how things have changed and how the times have changed. How did learning change over time? And also in this time of the pandemic, how did that change even for innovation?
Yeah, well, I think, when I look at my school experience, the hub of information was the school, right? Like it's the library, things like that. Like I didn't have the internet. I actually remember, for someone who's very tech savvy, I was in university for 6 years to get my 4-year degree. And so I was a little bit of slow in that space, but I fought. They actually made us get email, and they had made us pay $50 a year for this. I'm like, over my
Oh,
dead
wow.
body, am I getting email and paying $50 a year to have this stupid service, right? So that's what I'm walking out of. Where like if you needed information, you had to go to the library, but there's only certain hours you can go, and that was kind of school and that delivery model. But now you actually have information everywhere, and I have access to this stuff at any point.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that's like it's there. We've always talked about it's important to develop our students as lifelong learners, but the opportunities for learning are so much. And then the shift I think happens, and I think this is one of the disconnects when you talk to people that maybe don't participate in school or maybe don't have this vision of what it could be. The expectation is that, oh, like you're just doing internet stuff, but kids don't know how to read and write. And it's like, no, 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 that's not it at all. Like I actually, this is
Right.
surprising to a lot of people. I actually think it's really important you know your times tables. Like I actually think it's good to do well on your spelling test. I don't think those are bad things. It's just saying that we're not limiting our kids to just know their times tables. We actually want them to go because they have access to information to so much more. We need to ensure that they have these basic skills, but also that they're doing something beyond what I could have done in school. And that to me is a huge shift. So for example, like I actually, the reason I wrote my book is I started a blog, and the whole reason I started my blog was because we wanted every student in our school district to have a blog so they could create their own space and share their learning over time. But we didn't know what we were doing because nobody had learned that way. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go first and figure this out. And so I went through that process, and amazing led to multiple books. It led to a speaking career accidentally. I didn't say like, hey, I'm going to blog to like. The only reason I wanted to blog was to actually learn how to do it so I could explain it to my students and talk from a place of experience. But the interesting thing is, we actually had our students blogging, and they were writing more than they ever were before, because they weren't just writing their initial thing that they were sharing for school. They were now commenting on each other's posts. They were actually responding to their comments. And so when I was sharing that with, parents, I'm like, our kids right now, they're reading and writing more. Like, think about when you were a kid, how many times did you read, write, and walk at the exact same time? It's impossible.
Yeah.
Kids are doing that all the
Yes.
time. But it's actually saying like we want to go beyond, not it's not it's we want to go beyond the basics, not move on from the basics. And I think that's the misconception. As I like I said, the basics are really important. It's just we can do more.
That's awesome. So what are the skills that is needed for or that is necessary, if you will, for innovation?
Yeah, so I actually talk about these characteristics of the innovator's mindset, and I list 8. And I hope I'm not going to get tested on that because I don't know if I can remember them. I could probably remember them if I really tried off the top of my head. But the first one that I talk about is the notion of empathy, right? And it's really kind of understanding other people, other people's experiences, other people's viewpoints, and things like this. And if you look at it from like a technology standpoint, when you think about your iPhone, right? When you think about your iPhone, people don't even realize this. I don't know if you have an iPhone, you have an Android,
Yes,
whatever.
iPhone,
But
iPhone all day.
okay, so do you remember? So do you actually remember when you got your first iPhone? Do you remember going through the instructions? Do you remember that?
No,
Like, do you remember? And you know why you don't remember that? Because there were no
I know
instructions.
the descriptions.
There's
Right.
no instructions, right? It literally, so this was a device that was built that you could pick it out of the box. And there was like so few buttons that if you just press one, it eventually would walk you through it. So it's kind
Correct.
of like, how do I make something that anybody could pick up and figure out? So I have to think, Steve Jobs is, known as probably one of the smartest people in technology ever. So you could give him something very complex, but he has to think like, what is the average person that maybe doesn't use technology that we want understanding this, to like have that understanding. And I think it goes like, it's not just about, the business standpoint, it's from a social standpoint. Like, what are some of the things that we could be doing for our kids to ensure that they're having a really great school experience, not recreating what our experience is in school. And I think that you have to understand kids. So the thing is, when and I don't know if you're on TikTok, I don't know if you share this stuff. When I'm talking to students and I drop a Charlie D'Amelio reference, and they're like, "You know who that is?" I'm like, "Of course I know who that is," because I'm like trying to understand the stuff that you're into, so I could actually kind of bring it into the classroom and see that experience. Kids are thrown off by that, then they experience it, but then all of a sudden they have the connection with you. One of the other concepts when we talk about the characteristics of the innovator's mindset, and I think this will be a huge shift for your audience, if they're not, K-12 education is not their thing all the time, is we don't just talk about teaching our kids to become problem solvers, but problem finders as well. That we want our kids to actually look at some of the things that are out there in the world and say like, hey, this is something I think is wrong. Here's something that I wanted to create. Here's an issue that I have, and then create the solution. So the experience for most people listening to you, if you're anywhere in the age range of myself, is your teachers would give you problems and you would have to solve them. But 90% of the time, I could care less about the problem the teacher cares about. And so like, where's the investment in it? So if I'm actually the one who's searching for that problem and understanding why it's so necessary for me to kind of look at what some of the solutions are, then I'll be more invested in creating a solution. That's where the innovation comes in. Nobody's innovative in stuff they don't care about. And I think that's part of it too, is having problem solvers and finders. And we also talk about the importance of being observant, noticing things around the world. So a lot of the things that I talk about in education are not stuff that I learned in college, but they're things I've seen on TV, social media, and saying like, how does that apply to K-12 education? How do you make that connection? But I think one of the other parts of it too, and I'm actually working on a book about this right now, is the importance of reflection toward innovation. How do I look back and have an understanding of what I've done in the past so I can actually create things moving forward? Because I think a lot of time, especially where we have this attention economy where everyone's fighting for our attention for different things, it's all about consumption of information, but not necessarily stepping back, looking at it, making it, putting it into your own context, making your own connections, and then figuring out your new solution moving forward. So those 8 characteristics, and I listed 4 of them, are something that we say, like, if we can develop these things in our students, yes, they'll be fine in school, they're going to do well, but they're going to be really set up to kind of go to the next part of their lives. But also understanding, and I think this is a shift for a lot of people, I'm not here to say, hey, Brandy, you're my student, and here's how I'll tell you that you're going to be successful in school. That to me, anyone listening here, you could all think you're successful and you could all be right, but our definitions could be totally different. So we also work with our students to say like, hey, you have to figure out how you're successful. What does that look like? How do you get there? Not saying like, hey, you're successful because I, as the adult, decided you got an A in math. Like, that doesn't make any sense anymore, because we're all in these different pathways. And so we want kids to walk out, because most people listening to this that walked out of school, they'll probably like me. That's why it took 6 years to take a 4-year education, was like, I don't know what I want to do. So we're
Right.
trying our best to help kids find and create their own purpose when they walk out of school. But that means that you have to give them some time to really dig into things, not just, throw every subject at them, as minimal and shallow as possible.
That's awesome. So on my final question, I guess it really ties into really just the whole focus point on the future. How can innovation help individuals in the future? How is this going to expand us in our learning abilities moving forward?
Yeah. So when I talk about innovation, I simply define it as this: is it's about doing new and better things. And when I say new, I don't mean necessarily invention, but it can be iteration. So, for example, we brought up the iPhone, right? So, if I told you, Brandon, you know what? I really appreciate your time, and for this time today, I'm going to actually give you an iPhone. I'm going to brand new out of the box iPhone. And you're like, oh, seriously, that's awesome. And I'll say, but I didn't tell you which version, right? I'm going to give you the first iPhone. You're like, are you kidding? This is like a brick, right? Like, it doesn't do it. Like, the apps don't work. You can't really do much with it. And so when you looked at the first iPhone, right, that was an amazing innovation, but nobody would want that right now. Like, you think, I'd rather an old Razor phone than an iPhone. And then you look at the iteration of what it is now and how much more evolved it is. And so again, that's not about the product. It's about the thinking that went into creating that product and actually continuously evolving. So when we say new and better, the innovation part is the better part is the most important element of that too, because I don't know if any of your listeners know what a Zune is, right? Because the Zune was Microsoft's version of the iPod, and that went nowhere. So
That's true.
yeah, it might have been a new product, but was it really innovative? Did it do anything that people connected to, wanted to see it? So the thing is, when I'm asked about education, like, where do you see things happening 5, 10, 15 years from now? My response is the same as everyone else's should be. I have no clue, and neither do you, because I didn't see iPads and Chromebooks for every kid in our school. I didn't see coronavirus. I didn't see any of these things. What I want to develop in our kids is that no matter what comes your way, you will be able to figure it out and to thrive. And that's why that mindset is so crucial when you look at what we're doing, is because new things are always going to come our way. But how do we develop this? And when you look at education, we went K-12 educators from all over the world went from a space where they were teaching in school. They kind of had a pattern down of what they were doing. And then 2 days later, they shifted to remote learning. They went to these new spaces. They are doing these different things. And that's a mentality we've been trying to develop in people for a long time, is that things are going to be thrown at you, and you can kind of like complain about change, or you can actually create something with it. You can actually figure this out as you go. So I think that's something we really want to develop when we have that innovators mindset. We want to develop in our students that, yeah, what you need to do is have that ability to learn, to develop things. And I think it's connected to technology, in the sense that, I'm using Zoom today, and then it gets an update, and then there's 80 different things I got to learn right away. And I have no choice, right? They just decided. So I got to figure out on the fly. And so a lot of people that have been comfortable with technology are totally comfortable with change being thrust their way all the time. And so it's just understanding that, hey, things will come your way. They're going to be different, but how do you ensure that you thrive? And I think that's the mentality as you move forward. And that's what we want to develop in our kids in schools, because I'll tell you, when I was 18 years old walking out of school, I didn't say, what's going to happen in a few years? Like, we were literally having our teacher dictate what letters to write on a typewriter to learn typing. Right. And now every kid has a device in their pocket that they can write
Yes.
to whatever they want in the world. So no, nobody was like envisioning that mentality. But, when people say like, oh, kids are really good with technology, I'm like, I'm pretty good too. The difference is
Right.
I have the mentality to figure it out. And I think that's what we have to kind of embody.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I feel you on the last part, because I was the same way. I didn't see this happening when it comes to innovation and how we learn. And I no, I don't think anyone foreseen it other than cartoons that kind of did the futuristic
Right.
kind of things. But we even
Yeah.
then looking at the cartoons at that time, like, man, come on, nobody's gonna be talking on the phone.
Right.
I can see them, really.
Right. Right.
But now we see
Yeah.
it
We're
here.
just waiting for the flying cars, and then we'll be good.
Right. So tell us
Yeah.
more about the book. Where can we find it, and where can we get more information about what you're going to be doing next and up and coming projects?
Yeah, so the Innovators Mindset and Innovate Inside the Box, you can get them both on Amazon. And even though they're both tailored to education, the ideas actually are very they're connected to like all fields, right? Like we talk about how do we get, so Innovators Mindset is really about how do we actually get people to embrace that notion of innovation? Like how do we actually start from a place of strengths? How do we really look at focusing on doing fewer things better as opposed to trying to do everything a weak way? And I talk about some of those really important elements of developing that culture of innovation, whether it's in your school or your organization. Innovate Inside the Box, again, you can find on Amazon. And that focus is really, hey, no matter what, every company, even Apple, with what we believe is multitudes of money, they work with budgets. They have certain things. There's always constraints. And I think one thing that business can actually learn from education is that educators are amazing at creating incredible things within constraints to do those powerful things, right? We know education should be better funded. Teachers need to be better paid. And it's not saying that, hey, just don't worry about it. Just keep paying the little. They'll always figure out a way. But it's saying like we need to continuously fight to make our, the education system better for not only the kids, but for the adults as well. But my co-author for Innovate Inside the Box, she'll say that this year for the kids in grade 3, this is it. This is their one grade 3 year. We got to do everything in our power to make sure that that's the best year they have in grade 3. We got to continuously push to make that system better. But while they're here, we want to make sure that we do everything in our power to make it powerful. And so, like these ideas, this came from my blog. You can find me at georgecouros.ca. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram at gcouros. And I love having these conversations with people around the world.
Oh, wow. Thank you for joining us on the show. A wealth of knowledge around education, innovation around the educational system, and also just the mindset that we need to have in moving forward into an innovative world that we currently live in today. So it was a pleasure having you, Mr. George.
Hey, thanks, Brandy. It was awesome talking to you.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you. Join us next time. Here's next time on the Influence Blueprint.